maybe, just maybe, West Ham actually do have a plan. It's funny because all you hear is one side of the story sometimes. You hear the fan base, you hear us on the West Ham Network, you hear all the other social media channels, having their opinion. And you sit and you rack your brains about sometimes some of the most obvious decisions to be made, and they're not made. And you start to work and try and figure out what is actually happening at West Ham. And racking your brains and talking through the shows, it starts to kind of compute a few things, and it's maybe came up with Anton's theory, I suppose you could say. And this is my theory. I'm not saying it's my theory; it's a potential theory behind what West Ham may have in play for the future. Maybe West Ham do have a plan in place, and what I'm going to talk to you about is a different way of thinking about it. We, for many a year, have been talking about the Brighton and Hove Albion model, the model that seems to work, the model that shows a coach who can play with all different mindsets, different formations, exciting football, attracting very good young talent, selling them on for massive profits, but again, turning that table over and bringing in the next talent. And that's what West Ham fans in particular would like to strive to achieve. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. And it's hard not to see that Brighton have a smart and effective approach to the transfer market. And it isn't one sale or transfer that really has made them the envy of all the clubs around them. It's their consistently and their consistency that rightly attracts that attention. And there's multi-club ownerships, wealthy clubs all around. But Brighton seem to have found a way to compete with a financial stronghold. In fact, the most they have paid for a player stands out at around about £30 million. So put that into context with West Ham. West Ham have spent a lot more money than that. And we constantly talk about West Ham striving to achieve to the next stage. Can we acquire the best talent from around Europe? And if we don't qualify for Europe, would we keep talent and bring in talent? And because there's so many changes within West Ham, and we want this Brighton model, then surely that kind of contradicts itself, because surely this model that we're trying to achieve that matches the Brighton model would allow for some of the players to move on, progress for profits, for us to find the next best talent along the way. Surely the structure behind the scenes that hopefully we're creating would help to create this, what we're looking for. Looking at Brighton's sales and acquisitions in isolation does not really tell the story that well. It's not just the Moises Caicedo that's been bought for a mere £4 million, or the Cucurella, being sold to Chelsea for 50 odd million pounds. It isn't random or luck. There is a pattern in which Brighton operate in the transfer market. Very similar way that people flip houses and they flip players. This is something that not many other clubs do. Manchester United's and Liverpool's of the world would not be able to pull off this at a consistent manner. So how do Brighton do it? How have they managed to break this mold and achieve something that, let me repeat, West Ham fans would like to achieve? They look at undervalued young players that have displayed really good, above average talent, skill, or intelligence on the pitch. So they have a real strong scouting system, scouting the world, looking for the best next talent. But that best next talent is above averaged. Not where the whole world knows about this one player. That player also has no real experience in the top 5 European leagues. Just look at the deal for them signing Osman when West Ham were looking at him as well. The player's skill set, role, age aligns with captain's tactical structure on the pitch. And the player is not signed for now. The player is signed for the vision that he will be developed. This is why the Osman deal really hit home with West Ham fans, because we've been touting him for such a long time, and one for not right now, but one for the future. And Brighton are able to offer minutes to these players in the Premier League in a way that some of the bigger clubs can't do. They will give these players experience, time. And in that way, they're able to offer the player lots and lots and lots of minutes in a possession-based side that is flourishing. That's flourishing. Now, they may have hit a dip in the league, but that's expected. But they're able to take risks and punts on players for the potential of profit, but not just profit in money, but profit for the club's success and pushing forward and trying to get the higher league positions in the Premier League and then potentially qualify for Europe. Now, that model also has big misses in it. They've got players that they've signed, spent a bit of money, signed on big deals, and have not worked out for them. But that also means that they have also, in the other way, got players right. And I could go through some of those names. Casido, for example, Cucurullo, Matoma. Look at the quality of their players. And Brighton have become a lot of people's neutral fans' favourite in their time under. Listen, we have to give credit to Graham Potter for what he achieved, and now De Zerbi, with the way that they've played the game, the tactical approaches from both the managers, how they forced all the top sides to think differently when coming up against a Brighton and Hove Albion, West Ham included in that. And they are a different beast in comparison to the rest of the league. They really are. Now, if you think about a manager like Graham Potter, because we have to talk about him because he's key. He's key to the success that Brighton have had. When Graham Potter played against the top sides in the Premier League, he was high on deep circulation and high on wing play. Now, you know what wing play is, but what is deep circulation? That is when the team represents the tendency to move the ball around the back as opposed to launching a long ball or making a forward pass. They're comfortable in possession. And he did that against the top elite teams of the Premier League. But when he played the teams that weren't in the top elite, he still kept that deep circulation. His wing play was still quite high, but he added different levels of high retention, high crossing, and high counter passing. So he would change tactics, change formations, and keep that same level of intensity, but add in 3 or 4 other different dynamics to the game. Because his high retention against larger teams was not there. His crossing against bigger teams was not there. His counter pressing was really, really low. And never on either of the occasions, apart from maybe against the top sides, was his low block a key factor. Against the bigger sides, sometimes he used the low block. And what's interesting is when De Zerbi came in, the only real difference between him and Potter is when De Zerbi played against the bigger sides, he didn't focus on the wing play. He used the deep circulation, playing through the back, comfortable in possession, done the counter pass and the crossing high levels. And against the lower teams, done some more consistent, but put more counter press on the opposition alongside the crosses, getting the balls into the box against the lower sides. But their circulation of the ball close to their own goal ranks them high for that deep circulation, that ball retention, the keeping the game at their pace. And De Zerbi's Brighton is the keenness to bait the opposition into pressing, and in doing so, creating space for the players like Jesse March, Mitomas of the world to exploit, and then put the ball out the wings, cross those balls into the box. And they're a turning over team. They've got scouts all over the world. When one player gets successful, they're happy to move him on for a profit for the club. They're happy. That's what they want. This is the model I'm talking to you about that West Ham fans are calling for. So, a lot of credit goes to David Weir, who's their technical sporting director. We've got Tim Stein. A lot of credit goes to their scouting system. And we're bringing in a scouting system. A lot of credit goes to the statisticians. We're bringing in the statisticians. The one thing, the one piece of the jigsaw we might not have right now is the manager. And if we do look to change, then maybe we've set the structure in place. And if that structure is in place and we do change the manager come the summer, then maybe it's not as bad as we think. Maybe not qualifying for Europe is not as bad as we think. Listen, I want us to qualify for Europe. I want us to win trophies. Absolutely. But maybe there's a plan. Maybe there's a bigger picture. Maybe they have and are in talks. Maybe Tim Steiden's not going to leave the club. Maybe he's brought his brother in because he believes in the project. Maybe. This bold approach that Brighton had paid dividends. They scored loads of goals under Graham Potter. And De Zerbi's Brighton are the same. They've scored even more goals as well. But their efforts come in their recruitment. It simply does. The philosophy with signings in general is generally to take risky bets. And what's interesting is if you calculate those risky bets and how frequently they go for it. So, for example, if you look at the data from Transfer Market, and this is accurate up to August of 2023, arrivals only since 2017, Chelsea have had 184 arrivals. The second place team is Brighton at 174. If you work your way down that table, West Ham are 84. So you can see they're willing to take the risks, but they're low risks in terms of financials, but high rewarding risks because they can sell on for profit. It's actually a model that clubs around other lower ranked nations use. The Celtics, the Rangers, the top two teams in Denmark, top two teams in Norway. They look at getting these talents and selling them on for profits. Look at the deal for Osman. Clubs walking away with a bit of profit. And the risk factor involved in a lot of those signings is apparent in the transfer fees that they've paid for the players over the years. But their highest signing was, I believe, Pedro from Watford for around £30 million at the time. But the rest of them were no more than £20 million. But a lot of their signings were sitting at the £4 million marker. Now, those risks that clubs do not take, in most cases, are not able to take. You know, some clubs can't take those risks. But Brighton's big recruitment is widespread, and it's a big part of their success. And what's worth noting about Brighton's approach is how they lean towards the probability of failure, but decreasing that probability of failure with each transfer rather than focusing on the increasing probability of success. So, given that the players that they scout, there are players that have had maybe quiet spells at previous clubs and they go under the radar for the most part. And Brighton don't really shout out loud about their acquisitions to their squad. They don't. And when they do shout out loud about them is when they sell them on, when the world is watching. So they've got something that's working. It's what fans want. And it seems to be that maybe we're putting those foundations in place. Maybe. I don't know. Just a theory. And maybe the new manager that comes in utilizes that and changes the dynamics of West Ham moving forward. But listen, what do I know? I'm only cheeky little Anton, giving you, well, not little, but giving you a little bit of an Anton theory today. Do West Ham have a plan? Who knows? Come on, Joanne.